Greetings and thanks for your service to Christ and the church. I'm Kevin Batman and I serve as the General Treasurer and CFO of the church. If you're watching this video, you're very likely involved in the financial stewardship and operations of your church and or district. Thank you for your faithful partnership in the ministry of the Wesleyan Church. You're not alone. There are thousands of treasurers, pastors, board members, and other persons responsible for financial management within our churches, districts, colleges, and other organizations. One responsibility of every church is the annual completion and submission of the local church statistical report, or LCSR. The LCSR and process has changed over the years, but the financial items have not changed significantly for decades. This year is the exception. Historically, district and the general church have used the LCSR to collect data to determine the funding stream for district and general church operations, denominational support for Wesleyan educational institutions, and clergy development loan grants. Additionally, there have been a plethora of additional information collected for accountability and analysis purposes. While these purposes have not changed, the information collected has significantly. I'm very pleased to let you know that this year's LCSR financial information has been redesigned and the number of questions has been reduced by a third. The intent in all of this is to simplify and collect information that can be more useful to the district and local church over time. Here are the highlights. The 14th General Conference approved a new definition to determine the basis for district and general assessments. Tithes and offerings giving without restriction for the work of the local church. This change means that we are looking for just one number on the LCSR rather than 10 in the past. Please pay special attention to the comments to follow, which will provide more definition. The intent of the General Conference action was to streamline and simplify the assessment process. As always, assessments are a matter of trust both in calculation and implementation. The items reporting financial activity have been streamlined into the major types of income and expenses and are intended to reflect broad categories of groupings that a church might use. In fact, we anticipate releasing a proposed chart of accounts that aligns with the LCSR for those churches that might be interested. More information will be provided soon. The LCSR also uses some of the data collected to provide various ratios that may be useful to a local church or district. The longer plan is to include this data in succeeding years so that trends can be observed. I've been joined today by Dr. Sherry Gorvet, Director of Shared Accounting Services, a ministry of the Wesleyan Church, who will talk us through the specific changes in this year's LCSR. Thanks again for your faithful service to the church. And Sherry, please take it away.
Thank you, Kevin. It's our intent to make this process as simple as possible and also to provide you with information that your church can use each year to assess its fiscal health. Accurate reporting will also give the general church and the district the information they need to calculate the annual assessments. Our next step is to go through a section-by-section review of the LCSR. The financial part of the LCSR is divided into 5 sections: property and financial assets, income, disbursements, ratios, and best practice questions. In this video, our intent is to walk you through the new and hopefully improved sections. You'll also have a copy of the new LCSR in its entirety and a line-by-line instruction sheet for reference. The first section of the LCSR is property and financial assets. As in the past, there are questions related to the value of the church's property and indebtedness. This year, we have added 2 questions related to financial assets that will help determine the local church's reserves as they look to the future for planning. Checking and saving balances are generally recognizable. Year-end balances in other investments would include investments in stocks and bonds, certificates of deposit, or other money market securities. The second section of the LCSR is the income section. This section includes numbers that are both assessable and non-assessable income. The first income number to be reported is line 34, unrestricted tithes and offerings, assessable income. Discipline paragraph 2005 subparagraph 1 provides this assessment guidance. Base income shall be the total of a local church receipts of tithes and offerings given without restriction for the work of the church. We refer to these as unrestricted tithes and offerings. While the finances of the local church include income and expenses for work both inside and outside of the local church, unrestricted tithes and offerings are used to cover the ministry expenses that incur inside the local church. General Board policy gives us further direction in defining these areas that are inside the local church. These expenses would include general areas such as payroll, administrative costs, discipleship ministries, church assessments, property expenses, and outreach. These categories will also be used in the disbursement section as well. Unrestricted tithes and offerings replaces the previous assessment calculation called net assessable income, and is the single number used as base income by a church to determine its total assessment for district, general, education, and multiplication funds. This is a very important number, so please make sure nothing but unrestricted tithes and offerings are entered into line 34. Also reported in the income section are other contributions. These are funds that are contributed for expenses outside the local church and are considered restricted. These are often restricted by either the donor or by the local church's budgeting policy. Items that should not be included in determining the church's base income include wills and bequests, donor restricted gifts for missions, grant income from other organizations, donor restricted gifts for building campaigns that exceed the normal monthly debt payments, contributions for emergency relief or pass-through donations, and lastly, denominational ministry event initiatives such as conventions. Please keep in mind this list is not exhaustive. A new question for reporting concerns net enterprise income. Some churches operate enterprise activities such as daycare, schools, and rentals. The net income from these enterprise activities should be included on line 37. These are not assessable, but should be considered when determining potential unrelated business income tax liabilities. The next section of the LCSR is disbursements. Disbursements is broken into two parts. The first part is local ministry support for work inside the local church. This next part is other ministry support for expenses outside of the local church. Let's consider those expenses inside local ministry support. Unrestricted tithes and offerings fund the work inside the church. These are referred to as local ministry support. These disbursements are reported in the following categories. Payroll. All payroll expenses defined as salaries and benefits paid in total for all ministerial and non-ministerial categories. These benefits would include insurances such as group insurance, disability, or life, pension, housing allowances, and other allowances. Administrative expenses are those defined as operational budget line items that incur to run the church but are not related to a specific ministry or department. This would include items such as office supplies, postage, copier expenses, and phones. Discipleship ministries. These are related to the specific ministries of the local church. They would include ministries such as children, youth, worship, discipleship, small groups. Church assessment payments would include all payments made to cover the obligation for district and general church assessments. Mortgage and note payments, facility and facility expenses. Facility expenses would include the operating costs of the church facility, including maintenance and repair costs, utilities, grounds, landscaping and maintenance, and insurance premiums. These would not include the mortgage payments that are included in line 44. And the last section for disbursements inside the local church would be local outreach and benevolence. Local outreach and benevolence includes the mission work and outreach to the local community. These are items included in the normal budgeting operations of the church. A further explanation of these categories is also included in your reference material. The second part of the disbursements category includes expenses outside of local church operations. Funds that are used for ministry support outside the local church are considered funded through restricted tithes and offerings. These are not accessible. These disbursements include missions. Missions expenditures should be broken down between local missions that are for use inside the local church and national and global expenditures. New property and major remodeling expenditures include land and building purchases and remodeling expenditures that are not considered normal maintenance expenses. And other expenses such as pass-throughs to other organizations are included in line 50 as well. There may be other expenses that do not fit in other categories and can be noted here. The next section is called Select Ratios and is a new section for this year's LCSR. These ratios are meant to be useful for the local church. Looking at these ratios each year can help the church develop a dashboard that may indicate problem areas in the operating budget. Positive or negative trends can be identified over time by using these ratios. Many churches establish target ratios to assess their attentiveness to missional priorities. The first ratio is payroll as a function of local ministry support. This ratio shows the total payroll cost as a percentage of all local ministry support. Payroll cost as a percentage of local ministry is particularly helpful when establishing financial policy target goals. Church assessment to local ministry support will identify the actual percentage of the whole budget allocated to church assessments. Mortgage and notes payable to local ministry support identifies the percentage of the whole ministry budget allocated to debt and debt service. Facility expenses as a function of local ministry support identifies the percentage of the whole local ministry budget allocated to facility expenses. Finally, the months of reserve to local ministry support is a ratio that shows the local church how many months of reserve it has based on its cash and investment balances and the local ministry support budget in total. A minimum of 3 months in cash reserves is recommended. The last section of the LCSR contains questions regarding financial best practices. This section has been expanded to help you identify any potential weaknesses in the church financial systems. Does your church make monthly pension payments to the Wesleyan Pension Fund? The church's monthly payments to the Wesleyan Pension Fund are used in part to provide disability and life insurance benefits to the pastor. If these payments are not made on a consistent monthly basis, the benefit payments may be negatively impacted. Does your church comply with the annual audit requirements of the discipline? Discipline paragraph 863 states that the local board of administration shall be responsible to provide for the annual internal or external auditing of the books of the local church treasurer and of all departments and auxiliary treasurers. This can either be done through the election of an auditing committee or the employment of an outside auditor. Does your church have adequate financial controls? Financial controls are policies and procedures designed to prevent or detect accounting errors and fraud. Examples of financial controls include accounting reconciliations, overseeing cash deposits, approving new accounts or vendors, and rotating accounting staff responsibilities, including offering tellers. And finally, who is your church's liability insurance carrier? Please include the name of your actual insurance carrier and not the name of a specific agent or agency. And that completes the LCSR.
Thank you, Sherry, for that presentation. We trust that this has been helpful for you as you plan for the completion of the LCSR this year. There have been a lot of changes, so please consider the instructions that may be provided in print or within the LCSR itself. And if you have questions, please feel free to contact either Sherry or myself. Thanks again for your service to the church. God bless you.